So Matt, some of your work has looked at the idea of the criminalisation of sharing, and I just wondered if you could explain what you mean by that term.
Well, thank you. A lot of my research in the last 10 years has focused on file sharing and the extension of file sharing to a wider domain of sharing-based activities. Now, one thing that sociology is often defined in opposition to is economics. And economics is the science of the production of things and the allocation of resources in a condition of scarcity. And it's often assumed that scarcity underpins everything that we do and that life is impinged always by there's never enough to go around and we have to share out what there is by some kind of mechanism. And in our society, that mechanism is markets and property. So if it belongs to me, it doesn't belong to you. In a situation of scarcity, we might argue that markets and property are absolutely essential and necessary mechanisms. Now, my interest is, as society has changed, as the cost of making books, records, films, computer software, pharmaceutical products falls in the actual physical cost of making additional copies, is it the case that laws of property and laws of markets continue to successfully incentivize the creation of innovative goods and successfully enable their distribution? And basically, my research suggests that actually, in conditions of what I would describe as post-scarcity, where each computer user can download, copy a near infinite number for no additional cost of informational goods, scarcity disappears. Now, of course, in a society that's built on property and markets, you cannot make a profit on the production of things that are not scarce. If there's an infinite supply, price falls to nothing. Now, you might say that's a wonderful situation where efficiency has enabled the abolition of scarcity. But of course, that's a threat to those that would profit from scarcity. And consequently, in recent years, the laws in both individual countries, such as our own, and worldwide, and in the sense of harmonization of laws globally, has enforced an ever tighter criminalization of forms of copying. And what's interesting for me is the struggle between global networks that facilitate free distribution, free circulation, free copying, and increasing regulative frameworks that try to lock that down at a global level, whether it be the World Trade Organization, the Trade-Related Intellectual Property and Services Treaty, the more recent ACTA, TRIPS, TTIP, TPIP. So we live in a globalized world, but for some, globalization represents deregulation, people able to download and copy at will. For others, globalization represents a new form of regulation, whereby what you can do and what you can't do is harmonized by laws that are kind of increasingly global. So I'm interested in that as a tension in the meaning of globalization.
And so in modern societies, things were produced and took value to produce. We could share books and things like that, but weren't supposed to, right? Is that, or we were allowed to share books, but we weren't allowed to copy CDs off of each other. But now in times where we could easily just download the same thing and it doesn't cost anyone anything, that's where the society and social policy is acting to stop us doing that.
Yes, over the course of the last 1,000 years, the development of the printing press, the recording press, the advent of cassette, the advent of video, the advent of digital copying, compression formats, distribution formats, the internet, the World Wide Web. Basically, we have seen a technical explosion in the capacity to copy, to make copies of things. That has actually reduced the price of copying those things. The question then becomes, do we live in a society where things are free, or do we live in a society that has to protect scarcity by increasingly tightly regulated laws around intellectual property?
And because one of the interesting things with that as well is whereas societies, and correct me if I'm wrong, whereas societies used to police and arrest and prosecute the producers who are of illegal things, like the people who are distributing, now in our global society, that's much harder to do. So for many things, they police the individual consumer instead. Is that
Yes.
Yeah.
If you think 500 years ago, the development of the printing press in Europe led to the production of unauthorized Bibles, people were prosecuted for heresy. A couple of hundred years later, it was treason that was prohibited through copyright laws that stopped publishers from publishing content that was considered seditious. Today, laws are designed to regulate the production of copies of new kinds. And as you rightly say, in the past, it was the record company or the publisher that was in the position to make copies. Now, it's every individual with access to the internet can actually make copies of records, can make copies of films, can make copies of books, can make copies of computer software, and more interestingly, perhaps, that extension from the printing press, the recording press, through to the video and cassette, etc., is now taking one step further with the development of the 3D printer. At the present time, it is copyright holders, those publishers of books, record companies, computer software companies, etc., that seek to defend their control over ideas at the level of abstract expression. But in the future, 3D printers will mean that you can actually download medicine, download a handbag, download a watch. Things that are currently regulated by trademark, by geographical indication, by patent, will actually also be possible for individuals to actually make their own copies. And the question that rises from that is that a good thing or a bad thing? Those that control the current monopolies will tell you that you cannot have incentive if everything is available for free. And I would argue that that's not true. Actually, recorded musicians make more money today from live performance precisely because their audience downloads content for free. Wink to the camera, because students who are busy downloading books from the internet will basically reference our book more, and consequently we'll get promoted. That's how I got my last job. Similarly, in medical research, academics share their ideas, free circulation, peer review. These mechanisms are mechanisms of free circulation. And actually, the claim that protecting property is the only way to secure incentive to creative work is simply false. If we look at musicians, hackers, academics, scientists, medical researchers, across these wider domains of creativity, sharing perhaps offers an alternative to the current society based on markets and property. We lived in a world of scarcity. We're told that we continue to live in a world of scarcity. But social transformation, in the past as in the future, may mean that that's no longer true.